So I fetched a coffee from the pizza bar and we shared it, and Ginger told me about Captain Hook. Seems this guy's Probin's his real name, buys 6 beat-up old narrowboats a few years back for a song. For a song is a phrase that means for nothing, for intending to do them up and hire them out for canal holidays. But when he finds out how much it'll cost to do them up, he decides not to bother. He's got a better idea. He's seen all these kids sleeping rough and he thinks, I know, floating doss houses, right? Dry kips, out of the wind, safe from the crazies, no hassle from the fuzz. £3 a night. So he rips out all the fittings to maximise floor space or deck space or whatever, and works out he can cram 60 kids on each boat, all under cover, 6 boats. That's 360 kids at £3. £1,008 a night. Of course, it doesn't work in practice. He's hardly ever full, even in winter, because it's not easy to score £3. And anyway, some kids can't stand being closed in. But he's doing okay out of it, just the same. Ginger broke off for a gulp of coffee, and I said, but surely there... Excuse me. But surely there's regulations, fire and that. Is it legal? I mean, what he's doing? Ginger shrugged. Fire? Health? Hygiene? He must be well out of line, but nobody's bothered. I mean, he's getting kids off the streets, see? Packing them away where the tourists can't see them, so the powers that be turn a blind eye. And where is this? Where's he got these boats? By Camden Lock. Do you fancy it? Out of the weather for once? I shrugged. Sounds okay, yeah, but I'm low on dosh. £3 for a kip. It'll clean me out. No worries, he grinned. I met this guy today, owed me a tenner. He didn't even have it, but he gave me 7. We're laughing. He must be working. Sort of, yeah. Sells the paper, big issue. Sells it at 50p. Gets to keep 30, lucky sod. He looked at me. Are we on then? I nodded and we set off in the wind with our heads down, sharing Ginger's bin bag. 2 lost boys off to the Never Never Land. Of course, Never Never Land there is a reference to Peter Barry's Peter Pan. Sorry, John Barry's. No, can't remember. Have you ever seen that famous diagram of a slave ship? Slaves crammed like sardines into every square centimetre of space. Well, that's what it was like on the boat me and Ginger ended up on. We parted with our £6 on the towpath where Probin had his office in one of those yellow plastic watchman shelters. He didn't look like Captain Hook. He was sitting on a folding canvas chair wearing wellies, a waxed jacket, a muffler, a knitted cap and gloves with fingers cut out. He had a smooth pink complexion and pale eyes and looked about 35. When he smiled, as he did when he grabbed the dosh, he showed very small, very even white teeth. He stuffed the notes into a bulging wallet, which he returned to an inside pocket. I was wondering why some guy hadn't mugged him for this when I heard a low growl and saw a Rottweiler the size of a horse gazing out from between his feet. Probin showed his feet again. Don't even think about it, kid, he purred. He must have been a mind reader or something, and then he pointed to the nearest of his boats moored fore and aft to bollards on the bank. Then, that one, he said, mind the gap. I've told you it looked like a slave ship. What I haven't said is it stank like one too. You went through a narrow door and it hit you. The stench of too many damp unwashed bodies. Too much lingering flatulence. Flatulence, for those of you who perhaps don't use that word, might be better known as breaking of wind. There were 3 steps down and then you were falling over sleepers, looking for a space in the poor light from a paraffin lamp which dangled unlawfully from the deckhead. You found a sliver of unoccupied floor space and bedded down, drawing grunts and curses from those who kicked and elbowed it in doing so. One thing, though, it was certainly warm. And you weren't straining your ears all the time, listening for potential assailants. The boat rocked very gently on the water, and once you stopped noticing the smell, the whole thing was quite pleasant. It's amazing how resilient wooden planks feel after lying night after night on stone. I dropped off almost at once and dreamt I was sailing my yacht through the blue tropic waters of breathtaking clarity under a cloudless sky, while Vince hurried back and forth with long, cool drinks from me, and my rat-faced former landlord cooled me with a peacock fan. It was terrific while it lasted, but waking up was a drag. So just a couple of thoughts there for you. Assailants, perhaps a word that some of us haven't come across before. An assailant is someone who might assault you, and that's the root of the word that it comes from. And then there was another word that I spotted in there that I thought some of you might not use very often, but can't find it now. And I just wanted to sort of draw the contrast of where Link has moved to in terms of what he sees as comfortable now to where he was at the beginning of our story when we started reading. So, you know, when he was talking about being in a house and being warm and etc., now just being in somewhere that stinks, that has a horrible smell, that you're cramped amongst other homeless people, you're sleeping on floorboards. This for him now is like a paradise. And I guess we can juxtapose that image with images that we've seen earlier in the story. We'll read on. Has it ever struck you how much money people waste buying crap? I never really noticed till that Saturday after our night on the boat when me and Ginger walked around the market. Camden Lock Market's famous apparently, but I'd never heard of it until that morning. It's right beside the canal, a big site crammed with shops and stalls flogging all sorts of fancy stuff. Hats, jewellery, T-shirts, mirrors, candles for Christ's sake. You name it, they got it. A lot of stuff's ethnic, Indian and so on. And they burn joss sticks all the time, so the whole place smells of incense. It's only there at weekends, and it attracts thousands of people. Anyway, me and Ginger walk around, and he says, "No shortage of dosh here, Link, old son. Money to burn. Breaks my heart how they chuck it away. Look." I look where he's pointing, and I see fat rainbow-coloured candles at £4.20 a piece. £4.20, he laments. They'll refuse you 10 pence towards a cup of tea, then spend £4.20 on a bleeding candle. Makes you weep. I chuckle. Why'd we come here then if it upsets you so much? He winks. Facilities, old son. Come on. I followed him up some steps and along a walkway, and there was some immaculate toilets. We used lavatories and had a proper wash. Ginger even washed out a pair of Y-fronts he produced from his pack. People were in and out all the time, but nobody paid us any attention. I must have had about 16 paper towels dry myself, but I felt a whole lot better afterwards. We're sipping scalding tea in one of the market cafes when 3 kids come in. Ginger knows them and calls out, and they come over and sit with us. 2 guys and a girl, all with packs, that grey zombie look you get from living on the street. Ginger doesn't introduce me and they ignore me. Talking 13 to the dozen with their chapped hands wrapped around steaming mugs. Where you been? How you doing? Do you ever see old what's his face nowadays? I sit gazing into my tea, feeling what? Jealousy? Maybe apprehension, certainly. These are Ginger's friends. They've shared experiences, have acquaintances in common. They know what he knows. What if he ditches me and goes off with them? If I was alone again, I couldn't stand it. Do I know enough to get by? A name comes up, a jokey name, Doggy Bag. Do you ever see Doggy Bag these days? Asked Ginger, and the girl shakes her head. No, she says, he's vanished. One day he's in his usual doorway, next day gone. Found work, maybe, one of the guys suggests. Or moved on, says the other. This closes the subject and the chat moves on, leaving me wondering how a guy gets a name like that. They get up eventually, shrugging on their packs. We do the same. None of us wants to leave. It's warm in the cafe, but the proprietor's giving us dirty looks, and we've no more dosh for tea, so we go before he can chuck us out. Outside, they say so long to Ginger, and one of them nods to me, and they're gone, melting into the crowd. Ginger's still here, and because I'm glad, I smile and say, "Guy you asked about? Why they call him Doggy Bag?" Ginger grins. He used to hang around cafes, and when somebody left, he'd slip over to their table quick and drop their scraps into a plastic bag before the waitress came to clear. He couldn't bring himself to ask for change, so that's how he lived. And that's why we christened him Doggy Bag. We left the market and trudged along the towpath, and I started to think about Doggy Bag. And after a bit, I had to keep my face turned away from Ginger because I was afraid he'd see I was struggling to keep from crying. I know it sounds daft. I mean, I never knew the guy, never even met him. But what I started thinking was this. I started thinking about how once, years ago, there was this baby, and his mum and dad loved him like mums and dads do. And they gave him a name and dreamed about what he'd be when he grew up and what his life would be like and like that, all like that. And how they'd never dreamed he'd be called Doggy Bag and live on scraps and be so unimportant that he'd vanished and no one would care. Daily routine orders 10. I do believe that the mountain has come to Muhammad. Right. The two dossers I told you about, the ones who laughed at me in the A market, well, I spotted them this morning at Camden Lock talking to some other scruffs. I know it was them. I never forget a face. And what I'm hoping is two things. One, that they've moved into the area, and two, that they'd split up sometimes. I mean, I'm good at what I do. Damn good. But even I wouldn't fancy trying to recruit them two at a time. See, you got to know your enemy if you're going to lick them. And I know my enemy. I've observed him. And what I've observed is this. A lot of these dossers get together in 2s, 3s and 4s and stick together. They might separate in the daytime. One might have to go to the DSS or something. But at night, they huddle together for warmth or protection or whatever. And of course, you'd have to be balmy to approach them then. And I'm not balmy. By golly, I'm not. No. Loners is what you look for in my line of business. Singletons. So I'm going to watch my laughing boys. And when they separate, we'll see who has the last laugh. The last days of January were a swine. I nearly went back to Vince. I mean it. It snowed every day, so the pavements were thick with slush, and nothing gets inside a pair of trainers like slush can. Ginger and I lurked in subways and doorways as much as we could, but our feet were constantly wet and freezing just the same. Night after night, frost turned the slush to grey iron and crept into our damp bedding to stiffen footwear and make sleep impossible. And if you think it's bound to make the punters more generous with their change, seeing kids wet and shivering, forget it. It had the opposite effect. Everybody slogged grimly by and their hands never left their pockets unless they were wearing gloves. Nobody stopped. Maybe they thought they'd die if they stopped, like explorers at the South Pole. We grew hungry, really hungry. The cold seems to settle in your bones when there's nothing in your stomach. You can't shift it. We tried everything. Stamping our feet, running on the spot, blowing into our hands, huddling together in the subway. It was no use. All we could do was keep moving through sleepless nights and days that merged into one another till we no longer knew what day it was or whether it was morning or evening. And one time, Ginger borrowed a marker pen from an old news vendor and printed a couple of placards which read, "Non-alcoholic homeless, please help." He said you had to put non-alcoholic because people seldom gave it to winos. He sat in the subway somewhere with our feet and legs in our sleeping bags and the placards on the muddy tiles. But he might as well have put, "Evil, shiftless baby kicker, after your dosh," for all the good it did us. We stood on raw feet for hours outside various hostels, but there was always hundreds of kids and we never got a bed. I started hallucinating, just seeing things in his head and picturing things that weren't real. For hours at a stretch, I thought I was back at Captain Hook's Foated Hulk. In lucid moments, I'd gladly have given my right arm to be there. But I knew that Captain wasn't interested in right arms. Once we'd been turned away from our hostel, we'd make our way to one of the stations, King's Cross or St Pancras mostly, and wait for the Sally Army. The walk would keep us from hypothermia, and the Sally Army came round about midnight with soup and sandwiches. It was free grub, so there was always a mob, but we usually scored a batty apiece or a mug of soup, and that's what kept us alive till February came and the thaw. The Sally Army is the Salvation Army, which is a charity that reaches out to those in need. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering why I wasn't attending job interviews all this time, I can enlighten you. My clothes were sodden with rags. My fingernails were long black claws. I had matted hair down to my shoulders and I stank. I wanted work, all right, would have killed for it. But I knew I hadn't a hope in hell of being taken on in that condition. I wouldn't have hired me. February wasn't a heat wave either, but it stayed about freezing most of the time and we kept our feet dry. Tapping got a bit easier too. Not easy, but easier. I imagined I was becoming streetwise, but I should have known better. I should have realised it was being with Ginger that was making things easy for me, but I didn't. Not until the day I'm going to tell about. The day Ginger vanished. It began like any other day. We woke up in a doorway when it was still dark, packed our gear and went off for some coffee. We were dossing near Camden Station and there was this all-night cafe called Brasilia where we'd sit warming up till it got light and we could start tapping. Anyway, this particular morning, Ginger said, "I'm meeting some mates down Alban Way this morning, so I'll see you later, okay?" I shrugged. Sure. I didn't know who these mates were or when he'd fix it up, but it was obvious he didn't want me along and I wasn't going to argue. The quickest way to lose a mate is to make yourself a drag, so I pretended I didn't give a toss. I did though. I mean, it hurt like hell. I walked him along to the station and said, have a nice day. He grinned and nodded and the stream of early travellers swept him away and I never saw him again. I spent the day trailing up and down the high street tapping. It was cold and blustery, but dry. I kept thinking about Ginger, wondering what he was doing with his mates in Alban and why he hadn't wanted me along. Maybe he's a dealer, I thought. Smack and crack, ecstasy. Or maybe he's got this rich bird, an heiress or something. And they're shacked up right now in her luxury penthouse pad, tearing up lobsters and swilling champagne. I wasn't seriously worried, not then. He'd gone off before and come back. I'll be glad when this day was over, just the same. There's a clock outside the station, and I looked at it every time I passed. At 5:30, I stopped walking up and down. Some of the shops were just closing, so I sat down in a doorway from which I could watch the station. I'd no idea what time he'd return, of course. It might be hours yet. But my feet were killing me and I had to sit somewhere. I could see the clock, so I kept an eye on that too. I'd never known time to pass so slowly. At some point, I fell asleep and I must have slept a long time because when the cold woke me up, it was after 11 and the station had closed. I'd no way of knowing whether Ginger had returned or not. I looked in all the usual kips, and he wasn't in any of them. I couldn't face the night alone, so I went to Captain Hook and surrendered every penny I had for a place on a boat. But this time there was no sweet dream. Page 81. Daily routine orders 11. Laughing Boy 1. That was the code name of the exercise. It was meticulously planned and beautifully executed, and now it's time for debriefing. In a well-regulated army, every operation is followed by a thorough debriefing, a sort of inquest, if you'll pardon the grisly joke. So, first, my intelligence work. The success of a given operation always depends on sound intelligence, and mine was a model of soundness. By golly, it was. What I did was, I learned their names. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Elementary, but in fact, it was absolutely crucial. I couldn't possibly have done what I did without it. What did you do, I hear you ask? Well, it was simple. The best tactics are often the simplest. I dogged their footsteps till they separated. You remember I said a target must be alone? Well, today one of my laughing boys, Ginger, took the tube from Camden. At first, I thought they were both going, but they parted at the station. The other scruff, Linky calls it, though Stink would be nearer the mark, started begging along the high street. I went away for a while. The target obviously wouldn't be back for an hour or two at least. And then I came back and hung around, looking in shop windows and buying the occasional cup of char. The Link fella was still at it up and down the street, and I kept well out of his way. I didn't want him noticing me. It turned out to be a long wait, and it could all have been for nothing because Link just wouldn't bugger off. It started to get dark and I kept expecting him to leave, but he didn't. Eventually, he sat down in a doorway opposite the station, and I thought, terrific. Thanks a lot, you idle, useless prat. It was obvious he was waiting for his mate. I nearly gave up, but it's a good job I didn't because the pillock fell asleep. And not long after that, I spotted my target coming out of the station. It was time for my master plan. I'm wearing my woolly-headed do-gooder rig. I run across the road and grab him by the arm, looking anxious. Excuse me, I gabble. Are you Ginger by any chance? Who's asking? He says. He can see I'm in a state, but he's cagey just the same. I shake my head. Never mind, I tell him, you're Link's mate, aren't you? He frowns. What's all this about? Is something wrong? I nod, pulling at his sleeve. It's Link, I gasp. An accident. He ran right out in front of me. I never had a chance. He gawps at me. You mean you knocked him down? He's dead. It's his turn to grab my sleeve. Have you killed my mate, you bastard? No, I shake my head, pulling at him. Not dead. Not when I left. Badly hurt, though. Asking for you. Where is he? Is he in hospital or what? No, my place. He's at my place. It happened right outside. He's badly hurt and you got him at your place? He stares at me, wild-eyed. Why didn't you call an ambulance, you stupid git? He could be dying for all you know. You better take me to him. I was magnificent, though I say it myself. He was a hard, streetwise kid, cagey as they come, and he followed me home like a 3-year-old. And of course, everything was set when we got there. I'd rigged up the settee so it looked like somebody was lying on it under a blanket. I'd even squeezed the blood from half a pound of pig's liver onto the blanket. And he fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. He ran straight to the settee, yelling at me to call an ambulance, and I nailed him when we went to lift the blanket. That was Laughing Boy 1. A brilliant operation, but I didn't hang about congratulating myself. I tidied up a bit. Then it was time to launch Laughing Boy 2. I planned to use the same trick in reverse, but when I got to the high street, Link the Stink had gone. I mooched about a bit. but there was no sign of him. Still, never mind. There's always tomorrow. Unless you're ginger, I mean. So we'll leave it there for today. Clearly now we know that Shelter has Link firmly in his sights, and we'll pick it up on Monday and see what happens. Thanks very much for following along. I hope you have a good day and a lovely weekend, and I will probably post a pre-recorded version on Monday, as I've got meetings on Monday morning. Take care. Bye-bye.
Did you turn on? Probably. Look, Grandma's there. Look, Grandma's here. Hi, Grandma. Grandma? She just aired the conversation. Was she just there? Hello? It's recording. Oh gosh!
I can't hear you.
Hello.
Hello. Where are you now? I can't see you.
I am
I can see you now.
in the sitting room.
What's that picture you put on in front of your name?
Oh, it's Daisy!
You hear Daisy barking. Where's Safi?
I can show you if you want.
Who's Roy Dillon? Roy Dillon's on.
Rory Dillon.
Oh, Rory Dillon. Daisy, stop it.
What are you doing? You're supposed to be doing work.
She wants to
He's talking to Grandma.
Safi! Where actually is Safi? She's in the garden, she's fine. Oh.